Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Tripoli, you responded to a previous question by saying that the costs do not go down when there are mergers. By cost, do you mean charges or cost of providing services?
I mean the underlying price of healthcare. After there's a merger and acquisition, particularly in the hospital setting, we see prices go up.
You're
up to
talking
50% higher.
about the charges, not the cost of providing the services.
The charges, of course, the charges to the patient, the out-of-pocket costs, of course, depend on whether they're insured, what type of insurance.
Yeah,
they're
but
full claim.
the cost of the hospital providing the services could go down, but the charges could go up.
The price of medical services after markets consolidate, after two hospitals merge together, goes up.
The price,
and then the underlying price.
The charges, okay. We were dealing with costs of services when we're dealing with surprise billing. It seems that when you land in the emergency room, providers could charge about whatever they want. We heard one service was $1,000 or $2,500 in the same hospital, or $8,000 down the street. There used to be a term called UCR, usual, customary, and reasonable. Is that still a limitation on what you can charge? Anybody want to answer that? No? Can you still just make up whatever you want, unrelated to anything?
Just to make sure I understand the question, is the question about the charge master price, where hospitals are essentially setting pretty much a price, they're building to price, and then, I think, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but I mean, if I take my car to a mechanic and say, change the oil, he can't come back and say, well, I'll charge you $750, I'm going to keep your car until you pay. It's got to be a reasonable price.
It should be a reasonable price. I think what we're seeing as a result of heavily consolidated markets is that the underlying price is not reasonable. It's not only high and increasing, but there's incredible variation across the market. So in one hospital system, you can, depending on your plan, your health insurance plan, the MRI can be $1,000 or it can be $3,500. That MRI should be one price because it's an MRI, it's the same service, it's the same across the whole country.
But that's not the case right now.
Exactly.
We've had a lot of complaints of PBMs and TPAs. How much of this could be solved if they were considered fiduciaries?
Thank you for the question. I think it would have, frankly, limited value for the reasons that Dr. Sastia brought about earlier because of self-dealing. You could say PBM, you have to be the fiduciary, but within the corporate umbrella of that PBM, they also own their mail pharmacy, their specialty pharmacy, the GPO. There's all of these other corporate entities that they could still bury these profits in. So I think it is important to really look at the global entity and make sure that you're putting regulation in place that makes sure that all of the entity needs to be driving in the best interest of its clients.
You want to answer that?
On the fiduciary question, I think there is potential for value in having PBMs or TPAs be fiduciaries, but we want to just think about it from kind of the functional sense of kind of what service is being provided here, what activity are they performing, and then with respect to that activity, is this something that we think that really it's very important that they be acting in the best interest of the plan members? And I totally recognize these are really complex companies and structures, and so but I think the idea here is that, we want them to be, working and to contain costs and not be just acting in their own self-interest. So I don't think it's necessarily like just clean, put the label on, done, but thinking through, yes, there might be some value in thinking of them as fiduciaries as well.
And I would just add, the fiduciary label in law implies that there is decision-making authority and ability to control the other entity's decision and financing. A great example, the PBM does not hold that decision-making authority on behalf of the employer, and a great example is the conversation we just had about rebates, where the employer is making the choice whether that goes to the point of sale at the pharmacy counter, to defray premium, to make the benefit more robust, or to apply it elsewhere in the employer's finances. The PBM does not control that decision. So as you look at that fiduciary label, that decision-making authority does not exist.
Let me try to get in one other question. What's the rationale for a facility fee when determine whether the procedure is performed in a hospital or a physician's office, particularly when they're charging these facility fees in a corporate-owned physician's office?
I think there's very little rationale for facility fees for a certain group of services. Ultimately, what's happening is you're seeing large healthcare corporations buying up physician practices, rebranding so that they can get a higher reimbursement. How that plays out in the commercial market is that consumers are experiencing a facility fee. So in the story of the woman I told, Ms. Tesso and her son, they did a 1-hour video conference, and they got a $1,000 bill facility fee, but they never stepped foot in the hospital-based setting.